Snow lashed against the castle walls of Oakhaven, erasing all trace of the missing queen. King Desmond had torn the kingdom apart for 3 grueling days. When his trackers finally discovered her path, leading into the cursed Weeping Woods, absolutely no one expected what lay huddled inside the frozen cavern. Panic gripped the stone halls of Oakhaven. It was the dead of winter, 1452 a season, notorious for claiming the lives of both commoners and royals alike. But the frantic energy vibrating through the keep was not born of the bitter cold. It stemmed from the empty bedchambers of the king. Genevieve, the Lunar Queen of Oakhaven, had vanished into the night. King Desmond, a man whose sheer size and commanding aura usually brought utter silence to a room, was tearing his own war council apart. He slammed his heavy iron-ringed fists onto the oak table, scattering parchment maps. "You tell me," his voice dropped to a lethal, vibrating growl, "that a heavily pregnant woman simply walked out of the most guarded fortress in the Northern Territories without a single sentry raising the alarm." Lord Hugh, the oldest and most traditional of the king's advisers, cleared his throat, refusing to meet Desmond's blazing golden eyes. "My king, the perimeter was secured. Lady Eleanor, her handmaiden, reported the queen retiring early. By the time Beatrice, the royal midwife, went to check her vitals at dawn, the chambers were completely empty. The window latch was broken from the inside." Desmond's chest heaved. Genevieve was carrying his heirs. Her pregnancy had been exceptionally difficult, her abdomen swelling to a size that had Beatrice whispering prayers to the moon goddess in the dark corners of the infirmary. Desmond knew she was in physical agony, knew her wolf was restless, but she would never leave him, not willingly, unless she was forced or terrified. Arthur, the lead tracker and Desmond's closest confidant, stepped forward. Snow still clung to his heavy fur cloak. "Sire, we found a single set of footprints bypassing the southern watchtower. They are faint, almost entirely covered by the drift, but they belong to her. She was unaccompanied." "Why would she flee?" Desmond roared the alpha command, slipping into his tone, forcing several lesser council members to their knees. "Why would my mate run into a blizzard?" A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the room. It was Eleanor who finally spoke from the doorway, her voice trembling. "Because she heard what Lord Hugh suggested, Your Grace." Desmond's head snapped toward the handmaiden, then slowly turned to Hugh. The older lord's face drained of color. "What did you suggest, Hugh?" Desmond's voice was dangerously quiet now. Hugh stammered, stepping back. It is ancient law, sire. The chronicles of our ancestors dictate that a litter larger than 3 is a curse upon the land. It divides the wolf spirit too thinly. It breeds madness and famine. I merely discussed with the council that should the Luna bear a monstrous litter, as her incredible size suggested, we would need to cull the weakest to preserve the strength of the royal line. A deafening crack echoed through the hall as Desmond's fist shattered the edge of the solid oak table. He didn't bother issuing a formal decree of treason. He simply lunged, lifting Hugh by his heavy velvet tunic and throwing him against the stone wall. "If she perishes in the cold because of your archaic poison," Desmond snarled, his canines lengthening, "I will ensure your bloodline ends before the sun sets on her pyre." Dropping the gasping Lord Desmond turned to Arthur. "Saddle the horses. Rouse the elite guard. We ride for the southern pass." The search was a nightmare of ice and howling winds. For 3 agonizing days, Desmond pushed his men and his own body to the absolute breaking point. The winter storms of Oakhaven were unforgiving, burying the landscape in waist-deep snow and dropping temperatures to a lethal extreme. Desmond rode at the front, his heart a frantic drumbeat against his ribs, his wolf howling in his mind. The bond between them, usually a warm, steady hum, had become terrifyingly faint, like a dying ember in a vast, dark void. On the morning of the fourth day, the storm finally broke, revealing the jagged, imposing silhouette of the Weeping Woods. It was a dense, ancient forest, where no pack dared claim territory, a haven for rogue beasts and outcasts. Arthur dismounted, dropping to his knees beside a frozen stream. He brushed away a layer of fresh powder. "Here!" he called out, his breath pluming in the frigid air. "A fabric tear, silk. It's caught on this bramble." Desmond threw himself off his horse, his boots crunching in the crusty snow. He snatched the small torn piece of emerald green fabric. It was from Genevieve's sleeping gown. "The tracks lead toward the Shadow Peak ravine, sire." Arthur pointed toward a deep, treacherous gorge. "There are caves dotting the cliffside, but—" Arthur hesitated. "But what?" "There are other tracks crossing hers. Large, paw prints. It's a mountain scavenger, a dire bear." Terror, cold and absolute, seized Desmond's spine. He didn't wait for his guard. He shifted mid-stride, his clothing tearing as his massive midnight black wolf burst forth. He tore through the snowdrifts, a blur of dark fur and desperate fury, leaving his soldiers scrambling to keep up. The scent of pine iron and something fiercely metallic hung heavy in the air near the ravine. Desmond's powerful paws dug into the icy terrain, his golden eyes scanning the limestone cliffs. The bond in his mind was a mere flicker now, a terrifyingly weak pulse that told him Genevieve was fading fast. Halfway down the gorge, partially obscured by a fallen pine tree, was a dark opening in the rock face. The scent of her was stronger here, mixed with the distinct, unmistakable tang of birth. But overriding it all was the sickening stench of a predator. Desmond shifted back to his human form, ignoring the biting wind against his bare skin. He drew the broadsword strapped to his back, signaling for Arthur and the guards who had just caught up to wait outside. If a predator was cornered inside, an ambush of soldiers might cause it to panic and attack whatever it was guarding. He had to go in alone. He crept into the mouth of the cave. The darkness swallowed the meager winter light. As his eyes adjusted, the grim reality of the scene took shape. Lying dead near the entrance was a massive, dire bear. It was a grotesque beast, its fur matted and frozen. Its throat had been entirely ripped out, the snow beneath it stained a frozen crimson. Desmond's breath hitched. Genevieve, even in her wolf form, was heavily pregnant and far smaller than this monster. The sheer ferocity it must have taken to bring such a beast down was unthinkable. "Genevieve," he whispered, his voice cracking. A low, exhausted whine echoed from the deepest corner of the cavern. Desmond dropped his sword and rushed forward, falling to his knees on the freezing stone floor. There, in a shallow depression in the rock, lay a magnificent snow-white wolf. Her fur was clumped with dirt and dried fluids. She was breathing in shallow, ragged gasps, her eyes half closed and glassy. But she was not alone. Desmond's heart completely stopped in his chest. Curled against her stomach, tucked safely beneath the warm, protective curve of her massive body, and a thick layer of moss she had desperately scraped together, were pups. Not one. Not three. Desmond's trembling hands reached out, gently parting the moss and his mate's thick white fur. He counted them in a state of absolute disbelief. 1, 2, 3, 4. His eyes widened, welling with hot tears that froze on his cheeks. 7, 8, 10, 11, 12. 12 pups. It was a physical impossibility, a biological miracle of the moon goddess herself. And they were all breathing. Tiny, fragile chests rose and fell in unison. They were squirming, blind and deaf, instinctively seeking the warmth of their mother's body. Genevieve shifted her heavy head, her icy blue eyes locking onto Desmond's. She let out another soft whine, nudging his hand with her cold nose. The message was clear. I kept them safe. She had fled into a blinding blizzard to save them from a twisted political decree. She had gone into labor in a freezing, desolate cave. She had fought and killed a monstrous scavenger while actively giving birth, or shortly after, to protect her incredibly massive litter. And for the last 2 days, as temperatures plummeted to lethal lows, she had wrapped her own body around them, sacrificing every ounce of her core heat, starving and exhausted, just to keep 12 tiny lives from freezing to death. A profound, overwhelming wave of awe and devastating guilt crashed over Desmond. He buried his face in her thick white neck, sobbing openly into her fur. He was the most feared Alpha King of the realm, a conqueror of armies, yet he felt entirely small compared to the sheer, indomitable will of the mother lying before him. "You are safe now, my love," he choked out, pressing his forehead against hers. "I have you. I have all of you." He quickly stripped off his heavy fur-lined cloak. "Arthur!" He roared toward the cave entrance, his voice echoing off the stone walls. Arthur rushed in, a torch in hand, his face pale with worry. When the flickering torchlight illuminated the corner of the cave, the battle-hardened tracker dropped to his knees in pure shock. "By the gods! My cloak, your cloak, everything!" Desmond commanded, his voice shaking with urgency. "We need to wrap them. She is suffering from severe hypothermia, and her energy is entirely depleted. We must move them to the castle immediately, but we cannot expose them to the wind." Arthur stripped off his outer layers without hesitation, shouting orders to the guards outside to prepare the warmest litters they could construct from their supplies. Desmond carefully began to lift the tiny mewling pups, wrapping them securely in the heavy furs. Each one felt like a fragile piece of magic in his large hands. As he moved them, Genevieve whined anxiously, her maternal instinct fighting against her severe exhaustion. "I've got them, Jen," Desmond whispered soothingly, kissing her snowy snout. "I swear on my life, no harm will ever come to a single one of them. Hugh will face justice. Our family will thrive." As the guards rushed in with woolen blankets and a makeshift stretcher, Desmond carefully wrapped his mate. She was shivering violently now that she had relinquished the pups to the furs. Her eyes rolled back as unconsciousness finally claimed her, her body surrendering the fight the moment she knew her children were safe in their father's hands. "Hold on, my queen," Desmond prayed, lifting her onto the stretcher alongside his men. The journey back to Oakhaven would be the longest ride of his life. He had found his missing Luna, and he had found a dozen heirs, but the battle to keep them all alive had only just begun. Hooves thundered against the frozen earth as the royal vanguard tore through the castle gates of Oakhaven. Courtyard sentries scrambled, hauling the heavy iron portcullis upward with frantic shouts. Word had already reached the keep via a swift-winged falcon, and the entire medical staff was waiting on the snowy cobblestones. Desmond leaped from his exhausted stallion before the beast had even come to a complete halt. In his massive arms, bundled in a mountain of thick furs, lay Genevieve. She was terrifyingly still, her skin as cold as the ice they had just left behind. Behind him, Arthur and the elite guards dismounted, carefully carrying the makeshift litters containing the 12 miraculous pups. Beatrice, the head royal healer, rushed forward, her experienced eyes scanning the Luna's pale face. "Get her to the Grand Infirmary immediately," she barked, pointing at 2 burly attendants. "I need boiling water, heated stones wrapped in linen, and every wet nurse within the city walls summoned at once. We have a dozen starving newborns to feed." Chaos erupted, yet it was a highly organized storm. Desmond refused to let anyone else carry his mate. He strode through the echoing stone corridors, his jaw locked tight, ignoring the burning ache in his own frozen limbs. He laid Genevieve down gently on the massive four-poster bed in the center of the infirmary, stepping back only when Beatrice physically shoved him away. "You are doing her no good, hovering sire." The elderly healer scolded, though her tone held a deep layer of sympathy. She pressed a hand to Genevieve's chest. "Her heartbeat is incredibly faint. Her core temperature has dropped to a critical level. She gave everything to those pups." Desmond watched in agonizing silence as handmaidens stripped away the frozen silk and wrapped his queen in layers of heated blankets. Across the room, a massive hearth crackled with a roaring fire. Arranged in a wide circle around the hearth were 12 velvet-lined baskets. The pups were squeaking and squirming, their tiny blind faces seeking nourishment. One by one, women from the lower town, mothers who had recently given birth and had been rushed to the castle upon Desmond's orders, began carefully lifting the pups to feed them. The sound of their tiny, greedy gulps brought a fresh wave of tears to Desmond's eyes. They were alive. They were impossibly strong, but the woman who had sacrificed her life force to make it happen was slipping away. Hours bled into a harrowing night. The storm outside resumed rattling the stained glass windows of the infirmary. Desmond sat in a heavy oak chair beside the bed, holding Genevieve's limp hand. He willed his alpha energy into her, hoping the mating bond could pull her back from the edge of the abyss, but the connection remained terrifyingly silent. Just past midnight, a heavy knock echoed against the thick oak doors. Commander Conrad, a grizzled warrior with a scarred chin, stepped into the room. He bowed deeply, his expression grim. "My king," Conrad murmured, keeping his voice low to avoid disturbing the sleeping newborns. "I must ask you to join us in the great hall. The council has convened without your summons." Desmond's golden eyes flashed dangerously. "My mate is dying, Conrad. The council can rot." "Sire, it is Lord Hugh." Conrad pressed, stepping closer. "He is attempting to invoke the right of the ancestors. He claims that because the Luna brought a litter of 12 into the world, she has unleashed a demonic plague upon Oakhaven. He is rallying the lesser lords to demand the pups be seized and—" Conrad swallowed hard, unable to finish the sentence. A low, guttural growl vibrated in Desmond's chest, rattling the very stones beneath their feet. He stood up slowly, the grief and fear that had consumed him for the past 4 hours, morphing into a cold, murderous rage. He leaned down, pressing a lingering kiss to Genevieve's forehead. "Keep her breathing, Beatrice," Desmond commanded quietly. "With my life, your grace," the healer promised. When Desmond threw open the massive doors to the great hall, the heated debate inside instantly ceased. The room was packed with nobles, lords, and military officials. At the head of the long table stood Lord Hugh, his face flushed with passionate fanaticism. "You dare convene my council in the middle of the night!" Desmond's voice was deceptively calm as he stalked down the center aisle. The lords parted, like the Red Sea, terrified of the lethal aura radiating from their king. Hugh stood his ground, though his hands trembled slightly. "We act for the survival of Oakhaven King Desmond, 12 pups. It is an abomination. The ancient texts warn us of this exact scenario. It is a sign of madness, a curse that will fracture the pack and bring famine to our doors. We must cull the litter before the curse takes root." Desmond reached the end of the table. He didn't yell. He didn't strike the man. Instead, he leaned forward, bracing his knuckles on the polished wood. "My queen gave birth alone in a freezing cavern. She fought off a dire bear to protect our children. She proved herself to be the strongest, most resilient Luna this pack has ever seen, and you call her children an abomination. It is the law, Hugh cried, looking around the room for support. A few nobles nodded hesitantly, clinging to old superstitions. It is not just superstition, is it, Hugh? Desmond asked, his eyes narrowing. During the long ride back, Arthur had searched Hugh's personal quarters under Desmond's direct orders. Desmond signalled to Conrad, who stepped forward, and tossed a small leather pouch onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud, spilling dried purple petals and crushed red leaves. The colour completely drained from Hugh's face. "Wolfsbane mixed with red clover root," Desmond announced, his voice echoing in the cavernous hall. "A highly specific rare combination. It doesn't kill a werewolf outright. It induces severe paranoia, agonizing cramps, and premature labor. My tracker found this hidden in your study, along with a ledger paying off one of the kitchen scullery maids." Gasps erupted around the table. The lords who had just supported Hugh now scrambled away from him, as if he were diseased. "You didn't just want to cull a large litter to uphold ancient law," Desmond snarled, stepping around the table and grabbing Hugh by the collar of his velvet tunic. "You wanted my queen to flee. You wanted her to die in the woods. Because if she died, and her heirs died, you believed I would eventually take another mate, perhaps your own daughter, Lady Fiona." Hugh gasped for air, his feet leaving the floor. She is weak, a foreign princess. She doesn't understand our ways. My daughter has true northern wolf blood. Your daughter," Desmond whispered, his canines extending, "is innocent of her father's treachery, but you will hang for high treason against the crown." Desmond dropped the gasping lord and turned his back on him. "Commander Conrad, strip this traitor of his titles. Throw him in the deepest dungeon cell where the cold bites the hardest. Let him see how it feels to freeze." As guards dragged the screaming lord from the hall, Desmond faced the remaining council. "Hear me now. The ancient laws regarding litters are abolished. Any man, woman, or wolf who speaks ill of the royal pups, who looks at them with anything less than absolute loyalty, will share Hugh's fate. Oakhaven is entering a new era, and it will be led by 12. 3 more agonizing days passed. The winter storm finally broke, revealing a brilliant, piercing blue sky over Oakhaven. Inside the infirmary, the atmosphere had shifted from frantic panic to a quiet, hopeful vigilance. The 12 pups were thriving. The wet nurses had worked in tireless shifts, and the tiny creatures had doubled in weight. Their fur was beginning to fluff out a beautiful mixture of their father's midnight black and their mother's snowy white. They were loud, demanding, and incredibly strong. Desmond was sitting in his usual chair, a sleeping black and white pup, resting comfortably in the palm of his large hand. He was gently stroking its tiny ears when a faint, raspy sound broke the silence. "Are you replacing me with a smaller, furrier version?" Desmond's head snapped up. The pup in his hand let out a tiny squeak of protest at the sudden movement. Genevieve was looking at him. Her icy blue eyes were half open, exhausted, but clear. A weak, beautiful smile played on her chapped lips. "Jen." Desmond breathed, his voice cracking entirely. He carefully placed the sleeping pup back into its velvet basket and fell to his knees beside the bed. He pressed his face against her neck, inhaling the sweet scent of vanilla and pine that he had been so terrified of losing forever. "You came for me," she whispered, her hand, weakly, lifting to tangle in his dark hair. "I will always come for you," he vowed, kissing her cheeks, her forehead, her lips. "I would tear down the mountains to find you." Genevieve turned her head, her gaze sweeping the room. She saw the roaring fire, the 12 baskets, and the sleeping infants. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over her pale cheeks. They lived. Desmond, they all lived. They did my brave, impossible Luna. He smiled, wiping away her tears. Thanks to you. Only you. Beatrice rushed in upon hearing the voices, immediately checking the Queen's vitals and declaring it a miracle of the goddess. The news of the Luna's awakening spread through the castle like wildfire, lifting a heavy shroud of grief that had blanketed Oakhaven. Over the next few weeks, Genevieve recovered her strength. The mating bond between them roared back to life, stronger and more vibrant than ever before. With Hugh out of the picture and his treason exposed, the kingdom rallied behind their king and queen. The superstitious dread that had clouded the council vanished, replaced by an overwhelming sense of awe. When spring finally melted, the snows Oakhaven prepared for a celebration unlike any other. The presentation of the heirs. The courtyard was packed with thousands of citizens, from high-born lords to humble merchants. The sun shone brightly on the stone walls, adorned with vibrant banners of green and gold. Desmond stood on the grand balcony overlooking the courtyard, wearing his ceremonial armor. Beside him stood Genevieve, radiant in an emerald gown, her white hair braided with silver ribbons. She looked like a true goddess of the north. Behind them, a line of trusted guards and handmaidens held 12 beautifully woven baskets. Desmond raised his hand, and the roaring crowd fell into a hushed, reverent silence. People of Oakhaven. Desmond's voice boomed across the courtyard. Winter brought us a profound test of survival. It sought to break our spirits and freeze our hope. But it failed. He turned to Genevieve, offering her his hand. She stepped forward, her smile dazzling the crowd. We were told that abundance is a curse. Desmond continued, his voice filled with unwavering pride. We were told that the old ways demanded sacrifice. But my queen proved that a mother's fierce love can conquer the darkest nights and the deadliest beasts. Today we do not present a curse. We present the greatest blessing this kingdom has ever known. At his signal, the attendants stepped forward, gently lifting the 12 pups, now a rowdy, tumbling, yipping pack of healthy little wolves for the kingdom to see. The crowd erupted. It was a deafening roar of joy, cheers, and howling that echoed through the valleys and shook the ancient pines. Flowers were tossed into the air, and musicians struck up a lively, triumphant tune. Genevieve leaned against Desmond's side, watching her massive, chaotic family with a heart overflowing with love. She had faced the freezing dark, she had fought tooth and nail, and she had won. 12. Desmond chuckled, wrapping his arm securely around her waist, as they watched 3 of the pups playfully tackle each other on the balcony floor. The castle will never be quiet again. No, Genevieve agreed, looking up at him with shining eyes. It will be perfectly wonderfully loud. And so began the golden era of Oakhaven, a kingdom ruled not by ancient fear, but by a fierce alpha, a legendary Luna, and the 12 incredible miracles she had kept alive through the longest night. Thank you for experiencing the epic conclusion of King Desmond and Queen Genevieve's story. From a frozen cavern to a thriving kingdom, their love conquered the darkest of winters and the deepest treachery. If this miraculous tale of the 12 pups and the fierce Luna captured your heart, please drop a like and share it with friends who love werewolf romances. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss our next thrilling fantasy adventure.